Good morning. I'm Dr. Jinda, and I'm a family physician and also a family therapist working here at Bumrungrad International Hospital. And today I want to talk about child development and parenting. In my background, I do a lot of work with families and also not just children, but also adults, as well as in palliative care in patients who have chronic illnesses. But in the part that I intersect with helping patients, especially children and their families, child development is really an important part of how we understand children, and also why parents come to see me regarding their children, especially if they have problems or questions about parenting. So without further ado, I just want to start us off with understanding a little bit the big picture of child's mental health. 1 in 5 children has mental health problems, and we see this increasingly over the years. We have behavioral problems such as ADHD, the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, where a lot of us kind of probably know about this, where kids maybe cannot sit still, cannot focus, some daydream, and to the extent that it's hard for them to function in school. Another one is a autism spectrum disorder, where they lack the social skills, the eye contact, the focus, the way of interacting with other children or other people is lacking that connection. And then there's learning disorder, where this affects them a lot at school, and conduct disorders, where you see that they have behaviors of aggressiveness, bullying. We have a disorder called defiant oppositional disorder, where they do not follow rules. They just want to oppose in any authority that comes along their way. And it affects the way they interact with the kids at school and with their teachers. A lot of times we also hear children don't want to go to school. So this is just a general view of how, if it starts to affect the function of the child in terms of school, in terms of at home, in various areas of their lives, yes, this is an issue definitely to look into. Or if they start to have a little bit of these things, but not so much to the extent that they cannot function, yes, then there is something going on with your child that you would want to, explore further. This one is about behavior. Another one, maybe not so, they don't really act out, but you can see that they're not happy, they're anxious, they're depressed, they're sad, sometimes both being depressed, or sometimes both really not sleeping and things like that. So these are emotional problem, anger, and this can also lead to suicide in even young children. We see like as old as 10 years old. Or younger now, as we see. So, the child's mental health is starting to become more and more something that we're really concerned about, especially now in the age of the internet with excessive screen time. We see how there's I hear a lot of problems of my patients coming in. Their parents are like, "Oh, kids, they don't interact with us anymore. All they do is just look at their phones, or just want to have iPad, and then when I can't give it to them, they're screaming at me," and things like that. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that in your own home. Or they're always playing video games and they don't want to study anymore. So this is also a common problem in this age and time. We also see some eating problems, that their kids don't want to eat. They're just so busy doing other things. So this is what is happening in our era. And ADHD is now up to 43%. Depression in teenagers is up to 37%, and suicide is increasing and getting at a younger age, as I was just saying. So we all have vision for our kids to be responsible citizens, be happy, be balanced, be resilient, confident, and handle life well, as well as communicate with others well. So what is actually happening? What are we doing wrong? And what do we need to understand? Well, I'm here previously having a discussion with Rosie that what do the parents at Regents really are asking about for this session. And she mentioned that, the parents are really curious to understand the child's brain and how it's related to behavior. And I just want to show this diagram here just so that we get the bigger picture as well as we go down deeper into the brain and how it's related to behavior. The brain is a mixture not just of genes or nature, but also of nurture and experiences. And this is so important that you understand this, and I think you all do, because your child's brain, as you look at it, is not just solely on his, oh, he's born that way. That's definitely not it, because a lot of it is impacted by the experiences, the parenting that we have done for our kids. And also, if you can see, as parents, we also have our own brains. And it's us, our brains, that interact with their brains, including all the teachers and other children and all the brains in this world that they interact with is part of this experience. So is it solely based on their brain only? No. It is also the interactions of other brains, like especially our brains. I'll get back to that later. Then we look at behavior, and it's not just behavior. There are thoughts and feelings as well that is underneath that iceberg of behavior, and they are interacting with each other in a cycle. You think, then you do something, or you think something and then you feel. And then based on this feeling, then you might act out or keep quiet. So it all interacts with each other. Not to forget the body. A lot of times what is happening in our body, in the child's body, also comes out as behavior. Like not eating your broccoli. Maybe eating the broccoli makes it hard for the body. Like it doesn't taste good. It tastes bad. And so I don't want to eat my broccoli. My daughter, my daughter doesn't like to eat eggs. And our family loves eggs so much. And my mother, her grandmother, is like, why doesn't she eat eggs? This is very nutritious for her. She should eat eggs. And for 5 years of her life, since she was born, we tried so hard, and I said, Mom, I don't think she wants the egg. And as she grow up more, she's able to voice more that she eats it, and it does make her feel good. And so we start to understand and know more. But maybe as my mother, she's more like, it must be eaten more. It's a struggle, definitely, that the older generation wants to make her eat. But I said, no, she needs to listen to her body. And so we had to get that through. And interestingly, for me, I've learned that I now at this age just gotten diagnosed that I have allergies to egg. So I was having this conversation with my daughter that, maybe we should learn to listen to our body more. Who knows, if I had listened to my body, I might have known that I am not, compatible with eggs. And maybe you might have that too, but we didn't test her yet. This was pretty recent. So keep that in mind, that maybe the body is sending signals, and that's why our children is acting in that way. And then that interacts with their thoughts too and their feelings. And it goes on and on. Okay. As I said, the human is very complex, and we use this iceberg metaphor, which we borrow from Virginia Satir, where above the water line that we can see is the behavior. Or like this Russian doll, on the outer, bigger, the biggest doll on the outside shell is maybe the behavior that we see in our children or even in us. But deep down are many other layers, like in this Russian doll. Their thoughts, their feelings, their beliefs, their identity of how they view themselves, their values, and then maybe deeper down even the desires and what really pushes them outward. So how can we work on all levels for our children? The outcome of our children that we have envisioned is sometimes very complex, and it's not just about maybe one thing that leads to the other. Keeping this in mind, now we go to the brain. So the brain here is the neuroscience of brain growth. Over the years, scientists, especially neuroscientists, have been working really hard and now has come up with so many findings that we could apply it in the field of psychology and child development. And it's been very exciting for us as therapists and people who work with, the mind, to be really using this understanding of the brain more and more to apply to how we help our patients. And also parents, if you are up to date, this is, yes, as you've been asking, understanding the brain will really help. So let's look at this big picture of the brain first. One of the things we have to be aware of when we look at this brain is that it is made up of three main parts. We call it the triune brain. And the first part is this prefrontal cortex here. There's many ways to divide up the brain for different purposes, but today I'm going to divide it for the purpose of understanding psychology and child development. So the first part in this triune brain is front part, and this is the area where there's a lot of reasoning and logical understanding. And this is the part that is the most, the latest to develop in humans. It's fully developed only at the age of 25, and it's not really developed yet in our children, not fully. And especially in teenagers, it could be hijacked by this middle part of the brain called the limbic brain, whereas all the emotions is there. And in this limbic brain is this little part called amygdala, which actually can be stimulated to do a fight or flight response, which is pretty much a very primitive response. But what we can see in our young ones so often, and even in ourselves if we get triggered, and it hijacks this frontal part of the brain to the point that we cannot think straight, right? And so it happens with our children too, especially if this part of the brain, the frontal part, it's not really developed. Just knowing these two parts of the brain is very crucial to understand whether, your kids are, or us, is actually, really connected to, are really being ourselves, or really thinking straight, or we're just being very emotional and reacting to something in a very emotional way. But this emotional way is also connected to a lower part of our brain, which is very instinctual and very hard to shift. It's very physiological, related to our body. So some of the times we want to sit with our children and go, all right, you need to reason with them. But it's very hard once they're already flooding with so many signals from their limbic brain, which is also pushed by their physiology. So when you see a child going into that this mode where there's a lot of flooding, there's a lot of emotion going on, and maybe even their body, if they're shaking or if their heart is racing, you can ask them, is your heart racing? Are you shaking? And if they're trembling, if they're crying, this is sometimes quite difficult to use this part of the brain to reason with them. Sometimes even for us adults, there are those moments that happen to us, and I'll explain later why. So knowing this is our first picture of the brain that we have to understand. And in the next slide, I'll explain a little bit more later on that. Another part that we have to understand about the brain is how these are neurons, the connections of our cells in the brain. We're born with brain cells called neurons. That amount is already fixed in us in some ways, maybe a little bit more or less in the future, but pretty much the same. But what is happening is the growth of how the neurons are getting bigger and connecting to other neurons in this way. You can see how there's synapse formation, the connection between the neurons, more and more. By the 6 months, you can see there's a lot. So in the first 2 years, a lot of synapse formation and a lot of growth. But by the time they're going to their 4th and 6th years, we have what we call synapse pruning. Synapse pruning is like how we can see that they are starting to, the neurons connection are less and less. Like in a garden, you start to prune this part and that part. What we can see is that the brain, when it interacts with anything and all these synapses are fired and formed, is the amount of experience they get. If they keep using it, then these neurons are more and more connecting. But the neurons that are not used, that are fired together or not fired together, then it's pruned, it withers away, basically, really kind of like no more growth in that area, and it just slowly, wither and become less. And this happens not only just at this period in time, but also again at around 11 to 12 year, a very intense synapse formation and pruning. Along the way between 6 to 12, there's still the synapse formation and pruning, but not so intense like this. Why do we have to understand this? Is because sometimes we see our children really actively learning, or like the teenager really, involved and almost to the point it looks like chaos for the teenagers. But then they start to slow down and they start to be more directional. They start to be wanting to do something, only one thing. And so that's pruning. They want to stick to something and their brain is more wanting to wire to that. So that is how we have to understand that there are waves of ebbs and flows according to the brain development as well, not just only their desire. So the brain's growth appears linear in its capacity to learn. And this again, as we understand the brain, we understand the emotional regulation. When I said the amygdala is stimulated, the limbic part of the brain, it goes into hyperarousal. As I said, that they could have their heart racing, they feel like very triggered and anxious, or highly emotionally distressed and unclear thought. By this time, they're not calm, and you're saying, calm down, calm down. Well, to get to the window of tolerance where they could actually access their frontal brain so that they could think straight and be mentally engaged and use reason, you have to maybe use some mindfulness work, help them breathe, do some butterfly techniques where I would ask my patients to put their arms on the side. I don't know if you can see me, and tap. Okay, and ground themselves. What do you see in this room? What do you hear? These are techniques that can help your child and even yourself to calm down when you're in this state. Okay, to tell them to calm down will not help. It might stress them even further, going to even more hyper-arousal state. Or if they go into shutdown, where they're becoming unmotivated or numb, they're very still. This is called a freeze. So there's fight and flight, but then sometimes they freeze, and that's also the limbic brain hijacking that prefrontal brain. Again, use mindfulness and breath work, maybe some physical activity too, some energy, get them to walk around with you for a while, and you'll see that they can feel better. Then you can start talking reason with them. Okay, so this emotional regulation is related very much to the brain and how you can work with your children as well as with yourself for emotional regulation. And this window of tolerance is the window of learning. Then you can talk and get things straight, do problem solving together. Whatever problem that comes your child in your way, you can then start to talk together. But if not, if you're trying to talk through the hyperarousal state or hypoarousal state, you can understand why many times it doesn't work, whether it's for you or for your child. Okay, now going in depth more into the child development. Each child, as they grow up from 0 to adulthood here, Piaget has a theory. Piaget is a specialist in child development that we usually use his theory to understand that that kids have different stages of growth according to their brain. There's the part 0 to 2. The child begins to interact with the environment through the sensory motor. They use their sight, they use their hands, they use their ears, all of this to perceive the world, their mouth, like that. And it's very, very basic. And we still use it throughout our life too, in how we perceive. But as the child grows in the pre-operational stage, the child begins to see things in symbolic ways. And that's why we see them playing with, they have fantasy world, they have imaginary friends. So this we can see since 2 to 6 or 7. Then in concrete operational stage, the child learns rules such as conservation, they learn family rules, they learn behavioral rules, they learn school rules, and they operate from these rules. And that's why rules are so important for the child, but it can also cause them to feel confused when they go in different places where there are different rules. And then the last one is the 12 to adulthood, teenage years onward. They start to become able to develop abstract thinking rather than just the concrete thinking previously, and they can start to filter in what they think about the world, not just what they would operate on based on what other people are saying, especially the rules. So you can see why teenagers then become more and more themselves, but they also don't really follow your rules. Okay, Erickson also talks about psychosocial development in a way that we understand that there are different tasks in each step. And I know for you guys are focusing from 3 to 12. So this would be the part where there's early childhood. But in the beginning, in the infancy, there must be a development of trust, or else they will result in mistrust. If they did pass this stage, then in the early childhood, they will feel confident to have autonomy of themselves. But if they don't, then they will feel shame and doubt. Then in the preschool age, they will have more of the initiative, and if not, then they will have guilt. And finally, in the school age, a lot of industry, productivity. If they can't do things, if they don't get good grades, they may feel inferior. If their friends tease them or parents interact with them in a way that like disappointment or things like that without really talking it out, they might feel this, they might have this inferiority complex, which we talk about how they have low self-esteem. And by the time they go to adolescence, then they're trying to form their identity. So if these steps are not really, fulfilled in a way, then their identity would maybe be compromised and they might end up with role confusion. And when they want to go further in their adulthood years to have intimacy, generativity, or ego integrity, it can be quite difficult. But as we know, the good news for the brain is it has its neuroplasticity, and a child can have many opportunities, including in their adulthood, to really interact with many experiences that gives them the opportunity to, shift all of this. So it's not like, they're doomed when they can't do any of this in that age. More about that when I talk further. The last theory is the Bowlby's attachment theory, which is, again, as I said before, is the infancy where we start to understand trust. The attachment is so important that us as caregivers is their first attachment. They learn to be secure by the interactions they have with parents. The child, if crying, then the parents come and meet their needs. Oh, you're hungry? Okay, I feed you. They cry again. Okay, you have some diapers that need changing. I'll change you. Cry again. Oh, you need to sleep now. I'll hold you. They start to learn to trust because of the attunement of the parent, and they feel secure. But if they don't have that, then they start to have a development of an insecure attachment, which cause them to be either anxious or try to avoid. You can see how kids sometimes turn away, even though they really need you, but then they don't. They just shut down. They just don't want to talk to you, or some seem a little bit chaotic. Sometimes they're anxious and sometimes they're avoiding. but they feel that you can sense that they're kind of not okay, you know. And this is something that can go on into the adulthood as well, because there's no real secure attachment in the family. So like a tree, if you've ever seen a tree and how it grows from a small tree and then all the rings are expanded in the tree, kind of like us. We also, from the first year, have this, and then the second year, the autonomy, and it adds on. And so this is the development that builds on each other, and our trust still, the way we operate on trust still expands. The way we operate on perceiving the world through our senses still is throughout our entire life, basically. It's just that we gain more and more skills over the years and more ability to interact with the world through the development of our brains. And each of these interact with each other. Other factors that affect the brain development is, as you know, and in trying to instill in your child, nutrition is very important. Adequate sleep, adequate energy, movement and physical activity, as well as sunshine will affect your child's mood, including you too. As we see in colder countries where they don't have a lot of sun, there's a lot of rain or snow, then it also affects the mood. Again, I can't emphasize enough the parent-child interaction. As you can see here, every day is daily that they meet their parents, so then it affects their brain. Other factors like environment, how the family is there a clear structure? Is there clear boundaries between parents and children, or are they all enmeshed, or is chaos in the family? Is there something going on like taking sides and stuff like that? That affects as well, and the school. But more now in this era is not just family and school. We can see that they interact also with the outside world, like in the internet. You let your kids watch iPad, you don't really supervise. They can get themselves into the world of internet in any which way, and it affects their brain because other people are then teaching your kids too. Stressful events or trauma that affects you and your children, whether it's a death in the family, sickness, divorce, maybe problems in the marriage, and then war or natural disaster, like what's happening right now with COVID. All these things interact with our child's brain. Sometimes we don't realize that, but it does in its way, and we would never really know how it really affects them because it also interacts with their needs. Every human has needs, the physiological need, as we see here, but they also have safety needs and love and belonging needs. So while we try as best as we can to provide our kids with physiological needs, we have to also increase the meeting of the needs that meets their development. As they grow older, they don't just need air, water, food, shelter, and sleep. They also need to not only already at the young age, they really need safety needs, but also they need more and more love and belonging, that sense of connection. And we can see that as they transition into teenage, their physiological needs, they can take care of themselves, and you already provide safety for them. But then this part, the emotional and the connection, maybe we think they can take care of themselves, but actually they might still need a little bit more of this assistance here. And that will lead to a self-esteem, and this whole journey here is a lifetime for sure, and this, especially in this part up here, the self-actualization. So we've looked at all the factors, and we like to think, okay, what's the cause and effect of parenting and how it affects on our children? And then we might feel stressed by now, like, oh, it really depends all on us. Or what about the other factors? How much is it affecting my child? And what will the outcome be for my child? And I just want to give you one of the concepts from our systems theory that, sometimes the outcome or our child can be affected by different causes, as I was saying to you. But the other side of it is like parenting, cause B. Whether you do what one, two, or three, it could result. You do the very same thing for the maybe for one kid, second kid, third kid, but the outcome may also be very different. There are infinite possibilities because there's this concept of equifinality and multifinality. You there's so many things that can affect your child, and then one thing that affects your child can be resulting in many different outcomes as well. Saying this is so difficult to predict. Like this piece of bread here, when you put your mouth and eat this piece of bread, it's a bread, but do you know if it's actually wheat or milk or sugar or egg or yeast or water or sunshine? It went through the heat, and we don't really know which part. We can't say that it's egg, this bread is already transformed. It's bread. So the child is the same. Many factors becomes the child through a process that only the child actually might know or might not even know. But we can, as through therapy, we do like adult reflect back on their childhood. They come to understand how they become who they are too, through what process that impact them, but not completely. So it's not easy. What we can do though as parenting is to just think of it like the butterfly effect. Like the butterfly that flaps its wing from one side of the world cause in the other side of the world a storm. We try to flap our wings in the most problematic area where we can create that greatest shift. We just try to identify with our kids which area we need to flap our wings on and create the change. Just be a little bit careful that when you try to create that change, that the change is a more permanent change. We can see here this graph. The change can look like, oh, the child is getting better. Your child is more studious now, more disciplined now. But then after a while, no, he's become like not following the rules anymore. And then you try to implement some discipline, and then he got better, and then it gets worse. What's going on? Is there really a change? If this cycle is going on, then you have to be aware and maybe try other ways that create more permanent change. So coming back to this diagram, sometimes during the course of the kid, the childhood years, something happened to cause either the mistrust, the doubt, as we say, they haven't completed the task, according to Erickson, and is stunted at this area. So if it's from the core, they haven't learned to trust, then we have to go back to that stage and create trust again. If there's doubt because it got stunted at 2 years, then, and they're now at 4 years, it's still you need to go back and develop that area to create that sense of confidence again. So this is how we try to, go back and create that task completion so that they could create that strong base to go into adulthood. What happens? Why do they get stunted? Well, somehow throughout their life, they might have some trauma of love and identity and create shame for them. And when that happens, they are not, the part of them that got hurt stays hidden. Maybe they don't even realize it. And then they act out or they close down to survive. And in this area, it's not easy for us to understand what had happened because it might not just be you as parents. It could be bullying at school, for example, or interaction with the teacher. And even the teacher doesn't know, or we as parents don't know. But something has happened to create this part of them that is hurting, and then they act out in different ways. Like they might become aggressive, or they might suddenly become like, okay, placating, I'll just do whatever you want. But inside there, it's not really who they are. Or they can just become chaotic, irrelevant. Or we can see some kids become very reasonable, super reasonable, stick to the facts, unfeeling, and that's also not healthy. And if they have different parts of themselves that are stunted and through the trauma, you can see as you grow into adulthood, you might be aware that you have many parts of you that are fighting with each other sometimes as well. And that could also be happening with our children. Overall, if things are happening without any healing process for the children, they might end up feeling negative about themselves, about the world, or about the future. And with this triad of negativity, this goes into the depression for the nature of depression. So while we have, if we come back and look at our child, we might have a snapshot of them. And we might feel like, is this fixed? Is this how it's going to be? But as I was saying, no, everyone can grow, but there was a stunt in somewhere of their growth process. So how to help them? Unblock those stunts. Where is it that it got wrong? Like I talked to my child when she was older, and she told me she was bullied when she was in third grade. And it made her feel like she's not pretty. So we talked about that until she finally could be released from that event. And then she feels okay with herself again. And now she's wanting to look pretty now and order so many things online, but she is in COVID area, so she cannot go out and, dress up. But she still dresses at home. So it's very amazing to see how we can go back with our children and talk about the things that had happened, and then their confidence will return according to their nature that they have to grow. So the atmosphere to grow is very important. As long as you can provide the safety, the attention, the attunement and empathy, the acceptance and appreciation, the affection, and the allowing for them to be who they are, and the support. You're like the cheerleader. Okay, what do you want? What do you need? As long as you can have that time to talk and attune with your kid and allow that to happen, kids will have this secure attachment. They will learn to self-soothe and self-regulate, as I've talked before, the window of tolerance. They will learn more and more, and they will learn to trust themselves. Sometimes when we are kids, the kids themselves, if they feel like everything they're doing is always out of reactivity and then it's always not right, they always disappoint people, they start to lose trust even in themselves. And that's going against how they could truly be themselves as they grow. But if they trust themselves, they know how to regulate themselves, they know their parents are secure in them, then they have the courage to be authentic and confident and free. So for us, the butterfly wing that flaps, we know we have many factors, but we're going to flap to create that storm in our child, is to parent with vulnerability and authentic connection. The goal of the growth, first of all, whatever vision you have for your children, should never be above the self of the child. Always explore their feelings and their thoughts and help them to regulate their bodies. And no judgment, blame, or comparison, no shame. And especially if you want your child to take ownership of their actions or learn to say sorry, be the first to do so. And say sorry to your child. It makes a whole world of difference. And if you want them to be having gratefulness and know that they're privileged, be the first to feel grateful for them and look at the world with gratefulness. Maybe keep a gratefulness journal, thank you journal with your child. And it really works. And develop the communication and love languages that fits your child. Help them to also through their sensory and motor, even if they're older, the sensory motor still works. The face that you show them, the touch that you touch them, they feel this. These are nonverbals that are also important in communication. The time you spent with them. And finally, be in the spirit of collaboration and guidance. And last but not least, be consistent. So as you, the parent, become the base for the child to grow, you must be consistent. They must know day in and day out that you're there for them to meet their physical needs. Then they learn that the sensory motor, anything that they use as they grow, according to the development stages, you be there with them in that stage. If they need to play and have fantasy and imagination, try to find things for them in that category when they're at that age, 3 to 5. But when they start to become 6 or more, then use logic, skill building, and games and rules. And then when during at this time, their emotional needs are also important. But you must know that at this age, 6 to 12, sometimes they interpret things wrongly or things like that. So need to talk to them a lot about these things, but not too abstract. The abstract ideas will need to be coming in later. I give an example today. My nephew, I just got this story from my sister. My brother-in-law trying to teach my nephew who loves math, but he's, I think, 6, and then say, okay, we have to be good, responsible citizens. So if we get fined by driving, it's not safe for others, but it also that we get fined $70. And if $70, I can use that to buy you and your brother shoes at $30 each. And then my nephew goes, no, it's not all gone. You still have $10 left. Because my brother-in-law said, it's all spent on that. And so they're very concrete thinking. And my sister was like, does he get it that we're trying to teach him to be responsible citizens? Maybe not yet. But maybe yes, if we continue talking enough. So have a growth mindset. Help our kids and grow inside out, not outside in. They don't have to perform this and that, but then their insides are still not really catching up. That is pretty dangerous because then we don't really know whether they're really growing. They might be trying to achieve a certain standard, and then it makes them even feel less and less proud of themselves or loving themselves, and their self-esteem is actually low. And this is where a lot of kids come to see me. And then by the time they're teenagers, they actually don't know what they want, and they don't know what to learn. And then they end up not wanting to learn. And then parents are stuck with why that is. So start with our own mindset as well to see that sometimes when we're trying to help our kids change, it can get worse and chaotic before it gets better. And if kids can understand that they need to go through some difficult times emotionally in order to shift or transform better, then they will understand too. But they don't have to go at it alone. If you can be the secure attachment for them and attune with them at each stage, then the change process for them would not be hard too. And remember, there are many seasons. Sometimes kids are at the winter season at this point, like now in COVID situation, but sometimes they can be so vibrant and they come in waves of growth. So this one, I just want to encourage you that as parents, don't walk alone, okay? Try to expand your parenting team if it's you, and then your partner, please try to be a team or even seek help, find resources in the community and learn, because nobody is actually know how to parent from the start. And we, after seeing our parents parent us, may want to shift some of the things that we have been parented by. We ourselves might have our own stunted areas of attachment wounds that sometimes get triggered as well. And this is evident if we look at how we interact with our partner. Maybe he triggers me and me trigger him, for us who are wives. So, we can trigger each other, and it might be related to our childhoods as well. We might have that inner child within us, which then causes it's longing to connect, but because it's the attachment wound, then we turn away from each other. So the relationship in the family is very important, especially you as a parenting team. If any one of you are still a couple, if you're a single mom or dad, then please seek maybe extended family who, like the grandmother, the grandfather, who can be a team with you, but have good relationship first with you. If not, you might end up enmeshed with your child, or being too controlling, and this is not healthy for your child. We don't know actually what is happening first, what's the cause and the effect. Like the chicken or the egg. Did the egg come first? The chicken come first. So the relationship between parents, is it the cause for a child to have a problem, Or is the child's problem causing, relationship problem between parents? We don't know. But it's a phenomenon that happens that needs to be, addressed both ways because it affects each other. The best thing is to connect through active listening. Be present and listen. Listen to your child, actively listen and see. Listen with your eyes and ears and heart. Listen to your child, listen to yourself, and listen to your partner and other people as well. They're all like mirrors reflecting to what's really going on. And sometimes there are things that are happening in the family before that actually, like these are the ways the family, have you ever find yourself saying, this is how I've been taught, your grandmother taught me like this, and this is how the way the family do things. So sometimes as we start to be attuned to our child and attuned to how they live in this age, we might have to say, oh yeah, we've been taught like that. This is how I always study, but my child now is different. My child is in this era of technology. Like I look at my daughter, she has so many iPhone, iPad, computer all in one place, and she's studying, multitasking at the same time, but also focusing on sometimes. And I have to say, well, and then she connects to her friends to study online. I never do that before. I only study like, one book at a time and by myself. So this is where you need to attune with your child and not go like, this is how I was doing it before. We can learn to differentiate from our own family the way they are and help our child to be themselves. If you can look into yourself, do you have issues? Do you feel that you are not worthy, not loved before? Start with yourself to have self-compassion and understanding. Maybe you've never been held as well and you don't know what it is like. So maybe you need a hug as well, in where you feel as a parent, you're not good enough as a parent. Take that journey into yourself, where it might be at that inner landscape of yourself, there might be certain emotions that you don't want to interact with. There's maybe certain childhood moments that you don't even want to look in, but they may be the missing jigsaw puzzle that will help you become more whole and complete. And then you can become the parent to interact with your child in a more whole and complete way. And you might have to go through it layer by layer. And this is where you may want to seek help with a therapist in order to become a better parent for your child. Maybe you have to let go of some things that you have issues with your own parents. And this is where I find that I have to help a lot of parents with, that they need to also settle within themselves the forgiveness for their own parents. And that is the question, what was your brain development like? So unlock yourself first, and maybe you can unlock your child. And remember, actually every stage we are whole and complete like the tree. It's just that we had something that blocked the growth. And if we remove that, then you can continue to grow on your own. That's what I do with my patients too. They just continue after I help them out of that block. It's like when a car is stuck in a rut, we just push together, and then it goes on, gets out of the rut, and then the driver can drive on his way. Having said all that, here is 2 books that I would like to share with you. The Yes Brain. This is how we help the kids develop that confidence and courage and resilience. And Parenting from the Inside Out is focusing on the parent, how the parent can learn to self-understand and then help children to self-understand. These are both by Daniel J. Siegel, very renowned child development and scientist. Thank you.